Carla has worked with the United Church of Canada, during which time she launched Buying United, Embracing the Spirit, the Social Innovation Challenge, and most recently, the coaching program. She works directly in supporting their 350 new initiatives that have been funded through Embracing the Spirit. The 500 social innovations that have launched through the Social Innovation Challenge, and working directly with communities of faith to help them reimagine church outside of Sunday. I bring you Carla.
Okay, so who is already inspired? Awesome. Yeah, we're in the spire and being inspired. And my challenge, and I think probably out there, is like, how do we get started? Right, so we want to get to some of these different amazing outcomes and these great impacts, but how do we get started? And so I'm hoping to not give you answers, but better questions to get you started. Because what we know across the United Church of Canada and in other communities of faith in different denominations is the actual difference between a flourishing, vibrant congregation and one that is declining is often simply the mindset. So it's going from a no but approach to a yes and approach. And part of that, that turns into the culture. And so one thing I'm going to do in this room right now is you've been hearing me snap a few times. Have you guys heard my snaps, some of you? And I started hearing snaps. We call that positive, what do we call it, Dave? Positive roast? I don't know. Positive chirping. So if you like something that someone's saying, you're allowed to snap. Okay, so getting even that culture of positive reinforcement in rooms like this. Thank you, sir. So what we're going to do is really jump into this mindset. And, oh my goodness, we put in the wrong one. That's hilarious. Can you change it? Okay, so the big questions, you don't have my USB, so it's what I did email to you. But I'll start with, this is what I'm hearing out there. I'm hearing, you're going to have to go through my purse. Okay. That's okay. So, thank you. That's very positive. So, what we're hearing is a couple of things. Like, sometimes we hear that, there's just not enough kids in our church. Sounds familiar? Another thing we hear is, we're just trying to pay the bills. Sounds familiar? The other thing that we hear is, we just need a few more bums in pews. So these are the three things that a lot of churches are asking. What do they have in common? Any guesses? Any ideas? What do they have in common? Declining enrollment. They're talking about membership, age. We're talking about measurements. And what I pose to you, are those the right things to measure? Is that what we're really measuring? Bums in pews, keeping kids? That sounds a little scary to me. So what are we actually trying to do? Thank you. And so what we're really trying to do is figure out with ourselves what our own why is first. We can't figure out what to measure until we understand our own why. And what that looks like is there's this famous TED Talk that has these 3 rings. The outer ring is all about what we're doing. The middle ring is how we do it. And the core is all of that comes from the why. So when look at us, thank you. Okay, so these are the questions I was asking. And what do they have in common? They're measuring things. So this is what I'm talking about. It's basically, we have the how, the what, and the why. Once we understand our own why, we can then figure out what we should actually be measuring. And this is the beginning of the mindset change. So what I'm challenging you with is to actually consider for yourself, what is your own why? I go to many communities of faith, congregations, and I sit with their boards, their councils, and I start every single gathering with, why are you here? There's lots of amazing reasons why people say this, but I'm going to throw out to you my favorite response I've heard so far is from this lovely woman, and I asked her, why are you in this room? Is it because you love committees? and she's like, no, oddly enough, no. The reason why I'm here is because I work with people with developmental disabilities. And every single day, I want to be able to see the Spirit. I want to be able to see that every single one of us is God's children. That's my why. And by being part of this community of faith and being together, I am reinforced and better at doing that every single day. So I'm actually going to give us a couple minutes to turn to a partner, and I would like you to actually say to them your why. It's not committees, it's not all it's not that you love baking muffins, maybe you do, but that's not your why. So I'm challenging you to turn to your partner. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, so not too much time back and forth, to tell each other your heart, your soul, your why.
Go for it.
Just bring it back. So I heard a lot of that people's why was they like to be inside a big room on Saturdays together. Is that what it was? Okay, so I'm going to actually let you know that the number one theme that I'm seeing, I'd love to see a show of hands here, is the number one reason that we hear that people actually gather and are part of a community is meaning making. Meaning making. So having meaning in our lives, not necessarily just in that 1 hour on Sunday morning. Having meaning in our lives throughout our lives. Deep meaning. A response to something inside of us. Some might call it our soul, our spirit. So deep meaning. Show of hands of maybe if the theme that you just talked about had something to do with meaning. Okay. Yeah. And food. Yeah, I mean, food. And the second thing, and actually that's a top 3 for sure, is food. The second thing that I hear across the country is genuine relationships. This is where you can be real. As God's children, seeing each other as such, we can be very real with each other and trust. We can be genuine with each other because we will not be judged. We'll be loved. So I have amazing news for you. Actually, let's go. This one, genuine relationships. It's the community. So my amazing news for you is that meaning plus connection is the life that we all seek. It's when, and you know what? Studies are showing, and conversations with millennials, the millennials, these are the 2 most important things to them too. We are not alone. They care about this equally as much as what we care. We say that, they're spiritual, not religious. No, they're exactly like us. This is what they want too. And so guess what? If this is what we have found in our communities of faith together, we just need to remember that. And guess what? This has nothing to do with we need to get more children.
Come on.
Meaning and connection has nothing to do with paying for the building. And it has nothing to do with bums and pews.
Come on.
Right? So what has happened is we're actually measuring the wrong things. So now you're going, okay, smart, blank. We're measuring the wrong thing. So what should we be measuring? Is that what you're kind of asking now? And then, that's one way of saying it. And I'd say that's kind of businessy, and I like to churchify businessy language. So really, what we're asking is, what is our vision of success? Right? So that doesn't, that's not bums and pews necessarily. When you start asking, what's a vision of success for our community of faith? That widens what we're measuring. And we know that what gets measured gets done. And the best question from this is actually, what are we hopeful of? What are we dreaming of? And this starts to become the vision of who we can be, meaning-making and connections. And this becomes that compelling story that Tricia was talking about, that people want to be involved in. So, unfortunately, I'm going to actually say, well, good, we've already switched our mindset. So mindset number 1, right, was like, why are we here? And then what are we measuring then? And all the stories that happened just before lunch, what did they have in common? Did one of them tell you how many people were there on Sunday? I didn't hear that in any of their stories. Cool, everyone's with me? So I asked this question the other day in a congregation. It was their group and it's their EDGE team, so they're trying to reimagine what they want to be in community and all the same questions that we're asking. And this person who is very well connected in the arts, the first 2 questions didn't resonate with her at all. She didn't really understand what I was asking. But the last question I said, like, what are you hopeful of? And she said, well, I don't know how to express it, but on Sunday when I leave the sanctuary and we go to our fellowship time, there's just this feeling. It's safe. It's just community. It's love. That it's this intangible I can't describe. And that's what I'm hopeful of to offer to people. And that became something very, very compelling. And so what happened is that everyone really got on top of that, and they're like, yeah, that's what I feel too. And so that's one example, but going through these questions I offer to you is, could you ask your board or your council, why are you here? And could we start reframing what we're actually trying to do? So the next question that I asked, this is my 3rd question now, so now we have some measurements, new things where how we're measuring success is looking very different. Success is not thumbs and pews, success equals shalom, maybe? And so now the next question is like, you're telling me, Carla, that millennials like meaning making and connection. So how do we see them? They're not coming to our church right now, so how do we talk to them? So this next question really is like, how do we reach these people? I'm going to reframe the question of like, how are we listening? Right? How can we be listening? And my best example of this is a cute little Maple Grove United Church. They were struggling with the same challenge. Maple Grove is in Oakville, so their context is a lot of white folk have been in Oakville. And in the last 18 months, 30,000 mainland Chinese moved into Oakville. Like almost every single new building was being purchased by someone from mainland China. So Marar calls me, and by the way, yes, I am going to give you my cell phone number. She calls me, and she's like, so what do I do? Like, I was like, well, why don't you actually, like, where are they now? She's like, well, they're in the parks, because there's actually no community center. There was no newcomer center. There was nothing like that. And I was like, well, then you go to the park. We need to go to where people already are to listen. And so Marar went, and she spoke to them, and she's like, what is it that you're looking for? Like, let's not program for people, right? So, like Social Justice 101, how do we do it with them? So not for, but with. So Marar went into the park, asked, what do you need? And they're like, well, you know what would be really cool? Well, it's my first year here in Canada, and New Year's is kind of a big deal, Chinese New Year's. And I have no place to celebrate a really big deal with my community. And so Marar goes, well, I have this church. You know, I think we have space. 3,000 dumplings later, 300 people showed up.
Wow.
And 20 people, non-church, signed up for cleanup.
That's incredible.
So what happens after that is she goes, now what? Oh no, like that was awesome. Now what? And she's like, what else can we do for them? And I'm like, no. What is, it's not for, with, right, so it's with. And so if we're doing it with, go and ask them again, right? And invite them into leadership. So again, on the mindset, often we're always thinking, well, we don't have enough volunteers, we can't do more. And yet, when we're actually living out church outside of Sunday, it doesn't have to be about us. So what ended up happening is she went out again, she said, what do you need? What would you like to do? What could we be in relationship on? And all of a sudden, they came back with calligraphy classes. What? Maple Grove United Church would never have come up with calligraphy classes as the growing. And they would not have known how or where to start that, right? The next thing they came up with was Tai Chi. Again, they were not going to do that. And guess what? I mean, this is not necessarily the outcome, but it's a possible thing that does happen, is they were so floored by the generosity of Maple Grove United Church, they actively asked for Mandarin-led spiritual grounding practices. And they actually hired a mainland Chinese, Mandarin-speaking minister to support that development work. Not actually what you need, but is a possible thing that did happen from relationship, trust building, responding, being in partnership with them, all these great things. So the starting point is the mindset, and it's like, why are we here, right? Then we go to what are we actually measuring? Because these people aren't coming on Sunday morning. Then it goes to how do we listen? You guys with me? Okay, so now it gets complicated. So once we have all of these pieces and our mindsets ready to go, so this is kind of for your council, your leadership team, we kind of say the magic number is 5 to start like creating the culture change. What happens next is, well, I'm going to show you the pathway. So the question for you is, where are we now? And what's the next step, or where are we headed? And this is a theory of change that we have actually, for Embracing the Spirit and the United Church of Canada, is what we're seeing is renewing communities of faith. So there is hope. We all know this. So this little line up there is basically traditional church. So there was the growth period and then the decline. Then this one is whatever is new that's emerging that we really don't know what that is yet, but something is definitely emerging. Right, Spire? So what happens here is that we have the planning, if it was growing, we have the decline, and we have composting. We could also call that grandparenting. There's lots of ways, but how do we get from one curve to the next curve? Don't worry, there's more things happening. So what happens next is this new thing is like the innovation, which as lead for innovation, this is like, I love that space. Like, how do we translate this? And then rebirth into something new. And for each steps around here, there's like different activities that could happen. So if you're, traditional church still growing, and in some context that's happening, then we need to recognize there's opportunity or crisis. But here's the fun part, is the beginning of your pathway to change could be today. Because it starts with inspiration storytelling. I asked at the beginning, how many people were inspired by the stories? That inspires us to do something. We can do it too, because we've seen that other people like us have done it. Now what happens is one of these 3 things. Once you decide to do something, you can start on one of these 3 places for experimentation. If you have a new idea, you can talk to me. Again, I will give you my cell phone. And so what happens is when you experiment, new partners come on board because they actually go, oh, you want to do that? That's how you're thinking? Remember, it starts with the mindset. When you start thinking yes and, people want to work with you. So what now happens is the partnerships all hop on board, and now that congregation who didn't really think that we could actually do anything, well, the partnership says that we can. So congregation starts getting more and more ready. And this is actually a cycle that happens. And it keeps on happening until, we've talked about governance quite a bit, it keeps on happening until our governance and the way that we're working and our decisions are happening aren't working for us. So structural alignment is actually the next thing. And guess what? When you change your governance structure, what happened here at the Spire is they start getting excited. They get in the news. There's press releases. External communication becomes a lot easier when we figure out like who we can be. After that, new leadership pops up. People want to be involved. Friends of the Spire starts happening. And then financial sustainability comes from all of that. It's not actually the main focus, because that would be a hidden agenda, and that's not a very neighborly thing to do. But it does happen. We've seen this happening. And then back to what Tricia said, the end result of this, which is not the end, it's the beginning of the next loop, is we become an adaptive church. When we are an adaptive church, saying yes and, looking for partnerships and continuing to do all these good things, we're ready for whatever is on the horizon. So what I'm hopeful of showing you today is that there really is a pathway forward. And I think that I hope that I've given you some concrete steps that you can start taking and some questions that you can start asking. So not answers. I don't have your answers, but I think we have better questions. And I am fully available. I have so many people who think it's hilarious. If you Google me, my cell phone is available. If you go on the church website, my cell phone is available. So please do not call me at 2 a.m. But what I'm really grateful of is that I would say the first step was coming here today. So you're already on this pathway. Thank you. I actually look at this room as people with their hearts on their sleeves, and really the spirit is alive in here, and you guys are so passionate about each of your communities and neighborhoods and all the stories that you have. Like, how could I not bust my butt? Yeah, just in fact.
Just a question. I'm 100% on board with your presentation. You're fantastic. I think you're missing something, though, as well. Because my why wasn't there. My why is that we're here to change the world. When I read the Bible, I see this path to change that is organic. We can make change without having power. And I think that's something that we tend to ignore. I'm looking around the room. We're mostly probably upper middle class white people. So we are the power. But I think we are the people that can cause, that we're called to make change in a grassroots way. I think that's our model, and that's what really excites me.
And thank you. I will actually agree with you in that I would say that the meaning making and the connection is exactly that. So I will change that slide to very clearly say I like that. No, I love that though, like, because that is so genuine. It's genuine systemic change. And like, what other organization in this country, in this world, doesn't have a hidden agenda? Like, we're actually just, so Stephen Spicer from Wellington United, he always says, why are we in it? Like, what's in it for us? Because we're in it.
Thank you.